Hello, and welcome to Reimagining Love. I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon. I have been studying relationships for over 20 years as a couples therapist, a professor, an award-winning author, and as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Now, I'm inviting you into this space each week as I dig into some of the toughest and most fascinating relational dilemmas of our time. If you want to discover how to create vibrant and loving relationships in your own life, you have come to the right place. This is Reimagining Love. Hi there. I am really glad you've joined me for the episode today. I first heard about Brit, today's guest, on NPR. Her book, Do You Still Talk to Grandma? When the Problematic People in Our Lives Are the Ones We Love, was featured on NPR's Book of the Day. And after hearing about it on that program, I knew I wanted to invite her into this space. Brit is a speaker, teacher, and storyteller, and her book offers a path to holding on to our deepest convictions without losing relationships with the people that we love. And I think that most of us are grappling with this challenge in some way or another, right? Polarization is everywhere, both in our culture at large and within our familial and intimate relationships. And so often, conversations online feel like a zero-sum game. And at the same time, I am a firm believer that most people want to live in a world where we can have thoughtful, nuanced conversations with people we don't see eye to eye with on every issue. But it's hard. It's really hard. Brit offers us a way forward that goes beyond the black and white thinking that's so characteristic of our time, while also emphasizing the importance of holding fast to our personal boundaries and our values. I love the reminders she offers in this episode and the roadmap she offers for cultivating curiosity, humility, and openness, all of which are essential when it comes to connecting with loved ones we disagree with, including her reminder that it's okay to change your mind. I hope this episode proves helpful to you and opens your mind. I know that it did mine. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Brit. Brit, thank you so much for being here with me today on Reimagining Love.
Yes, I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I've got about 100 questions to ask you.
Perfect.
All things. But I want to start with the question that I ask all of our guests. Are you ready for the Reimagining Love question?
Yes.
Okay. So Brit, can you talk to us a little bit about how you are reimagining love in one of your important relationships these days?
So I've been thinking about this, and I think in the simplest explanation of it, I'm reimagining love as understanding this quote that my dad used to always say, which is, you can't give what you don't have. And I think I'm moving out of a season of feeling like love is almost a self-sacrificing thing that we do, like putting yourself second or last, into sort of realizing, I think that I'm reimagining, if I care for myself well, that actually helps me care for other people well. And putting myself first isn't selfish. It's a kind thing to do for the people I love.
Mm-hmm. Even though you grew up with a dad who had that beautiful quote, you cannot give what you don't have, you still had to really work with that. What do you think your particular blocks were? Like, what had you so convinced that love is sacrifice, love is martyrdom? That's my word, not yours. You didn't use that word, but what do you think was getting in your way?
I think it's a combination of things. I think one, it's all the narratives we consume, right? So the stories we watch and listen to and are exposed to regarding love all kind of have that element, I think. And the second thing, which I don't think it's necessarily bad, but sometimes you, like with my wife, I'm like, I'm so enamored by her. I'm just so I love her so much. It's just kind of, I want to think about her more often.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's not necessarily a negative inclination, but then being able to reel it back and being like, okay, I can't lose myself in this. If I want to have anything to bring to the relationship, I need to like sort of focus on myself as well.
What an act of trust, self-trust, and then also like relational trust. Like it speaks to, I imagine, just like the kind of security of connection that you and your wife have fostered, that you are emotionally safe enough in this relationship to prioritize yourself and trust that she's not going to go anywhere, retaliate.
Yeah. And trust that she's going to do the same thing, you know? And this is a
Mhm.
conversation we've actually had a lot, is like we find ourselves kind of swirling in this like moment where we're both really focused on each other. And then that's sort of where things feel like more confusing or chaotic. And then when we go and like prioritize ourselves, then it's like we're showing up to the picnic not empty handed, right? Versus showing up and being like, oh, do you need help bringing this? Do you need it's like we get to show up with our things to offer one another. That just puts us in a better spot.
It's a really important reminder because I feel like there's oftentimes we think about the healing path for couples is becoming more of a we, like starting to think more relationally. And that is certainly the case. There are couples who are way over on that extreme and need to move more towards a place of like relational thinking. But what you and your wife have discovered that actually you were too far on that end of what is actually a spectrum. And your healing journey has been to actually, yeah, show up to the picnic with your own dish and not worry so much about the other one. It's like, it reminds me of this idea of like, I really can't trust your yeses unless I can trust your no's, unless I can hear your no's. It's
Yes.
really
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And I think it tees us up nicely to move into talking about your fantastic book. Before we started, I was praising your book and you said you were really proud of it. And I love that. I really I'm so glad that you're proud of it because it's beautiful. And I'm already talking to my college students about it that I'm teaching right now. And it's going to be a resource that I refer to a lot. It's called, Do You Still Talk to Grandma? When the Problematic People in Our Lives Are the Ones That We Love. And you orient us to your book by talking about how 2020 for you was a turning point. And of course, it was a turning point for the world. And you had a front row seat to your parents' divorce, their 38 years of marriage. And you were 4 years into your own marriage. And you were sitting with this question of how do I hold love and care in one of my hands and profound disappointment in the other one of my hands. And that's what you are really reckoning with. So can you talk to us about your process? Because I know it is one that so many people struggle with in silence, but you brought this struggle to us.
Yeah, I think, a lesson learned in any area can be a lesson for every area. And so I think what was fascinating for me is sort of having this front row seat to what was happening with my parents and holding those two things at the same time, like deep, deep love and deep, deep disappointment. And that question of, is this possible? Sort of like went to every area of my life of, okay, how can I allow more than one thing to be true with it, which is something that I think, and I'm not alone in this, I think I've struggled with for a lot of my life, is holding a both and. And so I think in that scenario, sort of mining through that to say, what can I learn from this experience with my parents that's going to help me in my larger social landscape to say, okay, what do boundaries look like, and how do I hold this, and how do I sit in the tension and not just be like, well, I'm disappointed, so there goes all the love, or well, I love them, so I can't actually sit in any of the disappointment. How can I sit with all of it at the same time? And it was difficult, but I think so important.
I really needed to have you on the show because anybody, all of the Reimagining Love community knows, like, we always circle back to these both ands. Like, that is like probably the biggest through line in my work as well, is that we are so much stronger internally and relationally when we can hold these. What I'm so impressed with also in your work is the bridge for you between the micro ways in which we do this, with our parents, with our friends, with our partner, and the macro ways around ideology and politics and systemic factors for you, like that bridge, like you're crisscrossing that bridge like it's as easy as your next breath. And that's what's so impressive about your work and the way that you hold all this together is it's not just the both and, it's the both and at the micro level and the both and at the macro level. Can you talk to us about what it's like for you on that back and forth bridge?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just part of it is just how my brain works, right? Like, I don't know why or how, but that's what I was saying earlier. Any lesson I learn in one place, I think, where else does this show up? And I think, my parents going through their divorce in like 2020 and 2021, because it's not a fast process, then I started looking around, and that's where we saw like the rise of cancel culture. And that's where we're starting to have these huge, like you said, ideological and political divides and chasms. And I'm starting to see the same tension that I held with, can more than one thing be true? I started to see that tension happening communally and societally, especially on social media, of people being like, there is no nuance here. Like, I learned one disappointing thing about this person, and that is all I need to know. And that covers everything. And so then it's like, disappointing thing, cancel. And then here I was sitting in this like huge tension of trying to figure out, like, wait, does the love cancel out the disappointment? Does the disappointment cancel out the love? Can there be both? And so then I started to like put that onto the lens of some of our societal ills and say, oh my gosh, like, I think we're missing some really, really good stuff when we just jump to, it's one or the other, it's black and white, there's a line in the sand, and we need to sit in the gray a little bit more.
Beautiful. You write about how part of your journey, or part of how you understand this, is through the experience of having grown up conservative and evangelical, and that even though you left the church and you no longer align with some of the ideas that you were raised with, you grew up like with that idea that you thought that you were right. You know that place of my belief is right. So what do you take from that experience? Like, how does that experience kind of inform your work today?
Yeah, I take a lot from that experience, actually. I think it's such an interesting thing to be handed sort of a language and a lens for your formative years that you then sort of abandon or evolve out of or move from. And I think it's given me a sense of curiosity and even suspicion around my own self-righteousness. So I think now I'm tempted to believe that I have all the right politics, all the right ideology, all the right ideas. It's tempting to be like, oh my gosh, I'm on the right side of everything. But then I remember that, like, I thought that before, and I would look back on that now and say I was wrong. And I think it's important, and I talk about a lot about this in the book. And I think it's just really important for us to stay close to the versions of ourselves that existed before the ones we have now. Because if I can detach myself from, the younger me who sat in these churches and felt safety there and felt like I was right and all those things make sense. If I could detach myself, then I can look at the people who still believe that as like some kind of other thing and some kind of enemy and some kind of monster and some kind of something that's not me, because now I'm right. Now I have all the answers. But staying close to that, I think, allows me to say, like, okay, well, I thought I was right then, and I've learned new things, and I've evolved, and I've grown. So what makes me think that now I'm still not in a place where I'm probably going to learn new things, probably going to evolve, and probably grow? And that doesn't mean not standing up for what you believe in. I think that means a curiosity and an openness to the journey, that I didn't have all the right answers then. I don't have all the right answers now. And as I grow and evolve, how can I create more invitation, not only for folks who are at a place where maybe I have came from, but also how can I be open to the invitation of people who are also still trying to get me further and not plant my heels so deep in the sand, right?
Uh-huh. This is what you talk about in the book, is progressive amnesia.
Yes.
Okay. If somebody is listening and they can't quite anchor in, like, because for you, a big part of I'm sure it's not all of how you counter your progressive amnesia, but one of the ways you counter your progressive amnesia is by remembering the you that sat in the church that was so sure. Is there an analog for those of us who didn't have something like that, where we had one belief system that we were handed, that we evolved out of? I guess I'm thinking about maybe an analog of like the you before you started listening to podcasts or going to therapy, like those, is that the analog of sort of the you?
The you before. And even, I mean, even more simply, I think I joke. We have a friend that moved to New York. So I live in LA, and our friend moved to New York. No joke, like 5 months ago. And so we went to visit him recently, and we're walking down the street, and something had an interaction with someone on the street, and he was like, "Oh, so many tourists in my city." And I was like, "Your city?" I was like, "You?"
You're a newbie in that city.
Yes, I was like, you moved here 5 months ago, like, and it's this idea that all of a sudden he's like, I'm a new as a New Yorker, as all these things. And I'm like, you didn't know how to get on the subway 6 months ago. Like you know what I mean? And so we have a tendency to, and
Yeah.
it makes sense because as we evolve and grow and change, sometimes we feel like more ourselves, right? This version of myself and these things. But there's always a time before. And I think we have an opportunity. One of the story I tell is like when I was in school, like in middle school, my parents were, like I said, conservative. So we didn't have access to TV. This is like pre-Google, we didn't have Google, like Google didn't exist. And I didn't know a lot of pop culture things as a result. And so all my friends at school one day were talking about Blink 182. And I'm like, I have no idea what that is. Is it a person? Is it a place? Is it like an event? Is it like
construct, general construct?
Exactly. Like, is it a class we can sign up for? Like, I have no, is it like an eye disorder? I have no idea. And I said that, I eventually was like, I don't know what we're talking about. And they were like, you don't know who Blink 182 is. And so I feel all this like shame and kind of embarrassment. And I go to the grocery store with my mom, and then I see like a People magazine on the cover, and Blink 182 is on the cover. And so I'm like reading as much as I can before my mom's like, let's go, because we're not buying a People magazine, obviously. And so I get to school now. I'm like, okay, it's a band. There's 3 people in it. Like I got the basics, And not long after that, I'm at school again. Blink 182 comes back up, and there's another girl who's like, oh, what's Blink 182? And so I have an option in that moment to be like, oh, it's a band. I just found out there's 3 people in it, But I didn't do that. I then just transposed onto her the same feelings I had. And I was like, you don't know who Blink 182 is. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, I felt embarrassed. I felt shame. And now I have an opportunity
to sort
potato.
You wanted
to get that off my hands. And I think the vast majority of conversations I see online look like that, right? I'm feeling some kind of shame and embarrassment, and I want you to feel it too. Or I had this hard thing, and I struggled when I first moved to New York. No one helped me, figure out the thing. So like, you have to get it the hard way too. And so we kind of have this lens. And so I think when it comes to progressive amnesia, like I think there's an empathy that builds when we just remember all the times before we knew what it was like to get around the city, what it was like when we didn't know that band existed, what it was like before when we had those maybe conservative views, what it was like before we had a podcast or, whatever. Yeah.
Yep. Well, and what I hear so clearly in your example is this is a way that we inoculate ourselves against shame, that horrible experience of shame, but it's also how we create emotional safety in our relationships. Like, you are not safe with me if I haven't reckoned with shame and moved to a place of self-compassion.
Yes. Yeah. One of my favorite authors, Richard Rohr, he always says, if you don't transform your pain, you transmit your pain.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so we're just passing it off,
You write so much about splitting and then holding these shades of gray. And the binary is the kind of good guy, bad guy, in group, out group. But it also extends to that, right? Either I'm the one on the chopping block or you are. It's got to be one of us. And it's that.
Yes. If there's a line in the sand,
yes,
we have to be on opposite sides of it. Right. And I need to find myself on a side of it. And so if I can be 100% right, then that means that someone else can be 100% wrong. And that's where it starts to get dangerous.
Okay, so I want to make sure that I leave lots of time for us to talk about strategies. Like, what do we want? What are the actionable steps that you can offer to the people? So we're working on these both ands. It feels like there's one of the big ways that this plays out is in these generational divides. I mean, it's baked into your title, right? Do you still talk to grandma? And this idea of canceling the grandmas. So what do we need to keep in mind as we navigate these tensions? Maybe can you do it both ways, like with the people who are older than us and with the people who are younger than us? So maybe start with us vis-a-vis the older folks in our lives who we're struggling with.
So a few things. One is breaking down our binary thinking, right? So allowing for how do we hold the tension of this is an important person in our life who we've had all these experiences with, and they just said something that I hope no one heard, right? And wasn't recorded, or they're having trouble grasping this concept. Listen, the world is moving really fast. I think cultivating a sense of empathy is really important. And secondly, I think especially with folks who are older than us, how can we remember and hold in our hearts how slow change actually is? Sometimes I'll talk to friends and they say, I had this conversation, with my mom or dad, and I laid everything out clearly and they still didn't get it. I'm like, yeah, well, that was one conversation. Like, we have this skewed expectation that like one tweet or like one flow chart that we send in a text or one conversation. And I think just realizing, oh, change is really slow. It took me a long time to grasp some concepts that are really important to me now, that now I feel like I could explain at the drop of a dime, but they took me years to sort of unpack.
I love that. Yep. I talk a lot about like widening the lens of progress, like looking not just at this moment, but how would this moment have gone 5 years ago, 3 years ago, like looking at it iteratively. I think that's so important. That comes up. I love it about vis-a-vis our parents and our elders. It comes up all the time in couple therapy. It's like one of the most sacred things I can do as a couple therapist is hold that lens of progress and like reflect back. Here's how this would have looked, last year, 2 years ago. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. So yep. Right. But that's, my gosh, what a beautiful wish it is
Yeah.
that one conversation, one aha moment would be enough. Right. 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 Okay. Good. That's a really good reminder. And the empathy. So maybe the way empathy works there too is remembering that it took, what is the thing in your life that you had to try again and again and again before you really got it?
Yeah. And being okay with people being in process. I think once we arrive somewhere, we feel like it's not okay for anyone to not have arrived there. Or something I was told and have been carrying with me ever since this book came out is empathy is not an endorsement, right? So I think sometimes we feel like, oh, if I'm empathizing for someone and they believe this terrible thing or there's harm attached to their beliefs or these things, then I'm like putting my stamp of approval on it. I'm like, empathy doesn't mean I agree with you. It just allows me to see you as a human also on a journey and help me understand where and how and why you might be feeling these things.
Okay. Yes. I went to a really wonderful workshop last month at Psychotherapy Networker all about polarization. And it was Esther Perel and Monica Guzman and Bill Doherty. It's a beautiful conversation. And so I love this. Empathy is not endorsement. Monica Guzman said engagement is not endorsement, which I think, and the research has shown that it is more those of us who are progressive who are more likely to step away from relationships than those of us who are conservative. And I think part of what their frame was that when you are progressive, there's a kind of almost like a purity test, like how, and so that's, I think we're more likely to get confused around engagement is endorsement. Have you found that like this kind of like shame or fear if I've kept somebody who's ideologically different from me in my life, what are others going to say or think?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I think that's one of the main things that keeps people from sitting through these relationships is the optics of it and the appearance of it. And I think it's so detrimental. Like eventually we are going to have a chasm so big, we're not going to be able to cross it. And so everything we can do at this point to hold on to those relationships where those things exist and that difference exists, I think it's some of our most important work. And I have friends who I got to be honest, I think they are leaving people behind because of the way they will be perceived if they don't. And I do not like that at all.
Yeah. Boy, it's like the fear. whenever we think about, so like the optics of it, it feels egoic, but I think but it gets to something so deep inside of us, which is the fear of rejection from the people, from our crew, from our community, right? So it's like, it's that binary again. If I stay in relationship with this person who sees the world so differently than me and my people, then I'm going to lose my people.
Yes. And my people is also, it's very loose, especially as we talk about internet communities, right? But I think, so something I say all the time is like, humans will do anything to have a sense of belonging, right? Like we want community belonging more than we want anything else. And the story that I talk about in the book is this man who does a documentary about flat earthers, and he sort of goes to a flat earth conference. And something that like fundamentally changed the way I approach this work was an interview at that conference where the man was saying, how can you believe the earth is flat? It's round. We have all the science. And the person he was interviewing said something that I think this is so much of the conversation. He said, at the end of the day, he said, it's really hard to make friends. And I joined this Facebook group. He said, I go to 2 conferences a year, and these are the people who feed my cats when I go out of town. And so that man doesn't actually care what shape the earth is, flat, round, hexagon, octagon. Like, he could care less. He has found a sense of belonging. And so what I say and tell people all the time is, when you're talking to someone who has a different view of the world, very rarely are you arguing fact. You're arguing mostly against their sense of belonging, right? They have found a home in this church, in this community. These are the ladies they play bunco with on Sunday. And so that doesn't mean that we don't want them to evolve or to take on other issues, but there's a sense of empathy when I ask myself the honest question, what would they have to lose to agree with me?
What a
What
great
would it
question.
cost them?
Yes. Yeah.
What would it cost them to agree with me?
Yeah.
Again, not that I don't want them to, or not that it's changing. We shouldn't be having these conversations. But there's so much empathy when I say, listen, you're going to be fully accepting of the queer community, and I want you to be in this allyship, and I want you to understand all these things. And it might cost you your church community, and you might not get invited to that bunko game. And that just, I'll approach it differently when I can hold that reality, right? I'm asking you to put your sense of belonging at stake. And I'm doing the same thing for my progressive friends. Like, listen, people are going to talk about you. It's going to cost you, but what would it mean to sit in these relationships with people who don't see the world like us and try to make a change in that way?
It's such a radically different way to enter the conversation with that framework, with that question, rather than, I think so often what we do when we go into a conversation with somebody who views the world so differently than we do is we feel like this is our moment to try to make a difference and make a change. When we lead with that, no, it's no wonder somebody's defenses get up, get activated, and they dig in and we dig in. And so it's a different, really different, courageous pathway to wonder about, how did you come to see the world in this way? And what is the cost of you shifting it?
And to genuinely, not to bring my dad up again, but what a guy. He always said, the 3 most powerful words in the English language are help me understand. And I think if we go into a conversation and genuinely seek to understand before we're understood, I think it makes such a huge difference to say, I would actually like, help me understand how you came to this conclusion, or help me understand, and you end up hearing stories where you're like, honestly, gosh, that makes sense. Again, it's not an endorsement. It's not, but I could understand why you see the world like this.
Yes. Right. It's like that beautiful phrase of like, you know what? If I saw the world the way that you saw the world, I would make that choice that you're making. Like, if you see the world from that's okay. I get it. If I saw it that way, that would lead me to the same vote that you just cast or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
exactly.
Okay. So now do the other direction on the tree of, so what are the sort of like guideposts for the older generation when they're trying to engage with the younger generation that is making very little sense to them?
Yeah. I think this is where we need to just stay open and curious. It seems so wild, but at the same time, even our older generation, right? Like, I've had conversations with older folks and I say, what was something that blew your parents' mind? And it's usually something, like, my grandpa talks about leaving his factory job and wanting to do something to, and that was like
Yeah.
This is like the pronoun
His parents
conversation
didn't get
yeah,
it.
it's just like you
Yeah.
sound like you fell out of a tree, like this whole thing. And so it's some of the same principles of like, just remember that you push the boundaries, you push the borders of change. And there's never a time to stop being open to that. And even I'm not that old, but I feel like sometimes I hear conversations, I'm like, oh, I am not caught up. I'm like, what? You know, sometimes I like
Need a
listen to,
refresher.
yes, I listen to Gen Z talk and I'm like, I didn't even know half of the words in your sentence. Like
Right.
I have like Chat GPT open and I'm like, can you tell me what they just said? And so I think it's good to like, just, you never arrive. And that's not a hopeless, I think that's hopeful, right? There's always room.
I was just in a really wonderful conversation with somebody, a woman my age, midlife woman, who's Jewish, who is raising emerging adult Gen Z kids who are seeing the situation in Israel and Gaza very differently than she does. And those conversations are painful and threatening and confusing. But what's been really helpful for her is she views it as almost like a cognitive training program. You know, like when she puts herself in this place to toggle between her own belief set and what she was raised with and journeying into really trying to understand how her kids are constructing this in a way that feels so different than the constructions that she has had. It's like she's like, it is keeping me, it's flexing a muscle that is so important. And it helps her. I think she's found it helpful as a way of reducing the emotionality and the fear and the reactivity, you know, to see that what a gift to be able to stay in a conversation that is keeping us flexible and agile in our thinking and our perspective.
Yes. And it truly is a gift because I think so when we look at sort of what happens when we have all the rightness and we're right and we sort of close fist, I think it makes us at the end of the day in the worst case scenarios, it makes us violent, you know? And I think to have people in our life who help us flex those muscles. I just had this experience a few days ago actually where we were talking about vaccinations and my particular group of friends in Los Angeles is very dogmatic. Like you like sentences like if you don't understand this, like I can't even help you. Like you're not. And I kind of had this moment where I was like, listen, as someone who doesn't have kids and doesn't plan to have kids, I was like, but can we just agree that I think there's a lot of ways in which our medical system feels confusing and I don't know if it's for us and I don't know if it's like helpful. And I feel like medication, like it's all confusing. Like, why are there ads on the TV for these things? Like, I could understand how that would be overwhelming to try to figure out what is happening as a parent. Like, and I think this, like your friend, it's just helpful to flex that muscle. It's not about being anti-vax or being like we have these identity politics. It's just about being like, I don't know. I guess I could see how someone is confused.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, there's such a when we don't allow that muscle to flex, we're just able to be so much more dogmatic.
It's really hard, but it's like when we get to that place where our fists are closed and it's if you can't see this, I don't know how to help you. That's got to be like our own blinking indicator light that we've taken ourselves to a place. I mean, I think with compassion, because I think it's fear that drives that, right? Especially on the vaccine, when the framing gets life, death, you know, when that frame can be applied, although I guess that can be applied to many, many of these, right? That stance is just our own indicator light that we are so activated. We've gotten so reactive that we've lost any nuance. But that has to be our own check. I mean, maybe you, with the way that you can do it, you can kind of gently hold up that mirror and say, hey, you may have put yourself in a spot where this has gotten really binary in a way that's, you know, problematic. But probably it has to be the person recognizing, oof, okay, rigidity in my thinking is an indicator something's amiss here.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have conversations like this with couples as well, but there's always this I think what's true for my marriage is true for like my social politics, right? Which is like, do I want to be right or do I want to be a part of the change, right? Do I want to be right or do I want to resolve this? Do I like, and those sometimes come with two different approaches. If all I want is to know that I'm right, okay, well then no one else's humanity is even a factor in this, right? Because I'm right. But if I want to be a part of the change, then I actually need to know where you're also coming from. And I actually need to sort of engage. And I think our hesitancy to do that right now is it's troubling.
You know, your book came out in 2024, and I wonder, as I was thinking as I was getting ready to talk to you, like what has this last kind of 100 days of this new second Trump presidency, like how has your own really brilliant thinking and perspective on this been stretched and challenged lately? Like, how are you kind of meeting this moment? Same principles, needing to kind of add some principles and tools. How are you doing?
Yeah, great question. I in full vulnerability, the book came out in October, and I was on many podcasts being like, "Oh, I don't think there's a world where he wins. Like we need nuance and empathy for, when we enter this sort of new era." And so I was definitely caught off guard, and I've told my wife many times, I'm like, "Ugh." Like on some days I'm like, I wish I didn't write this book, and I wish I didn't believe in this way.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Like
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
wish I wrote the book that's like 10 ways to start a new community by yourself with only people you like.
In a little forest
Yes, exactly.
next to a little babbling brook.
Exactly. And just like start over, that's my next book. Yeah. But I think it's been really challenging
Yeah. Yeah.
for me, and also it's clarifying too. I think there's a whole chapter in there about boundaries, and um I think my boundaries have been super. You have to know when you have it in you and when you don't, right? If you're already maximum exhausted, don't go into a conversation that you know is going to require something of you. And to find that, like, if you're already done, don't turn on the news. Like, if you just to protect I've had to learn how to protect my own ability to show up in these conversations and to show up well. It doesn't serve anyone for me to just show up and I'm already like on E and think I'm doing everyone a favor.
You just did it again. You just moved so seamlessly between the micro and the macro, because where you started in our conversation was talking about how in your like choosing yourself, for the sake of your relationships. And I hear you also in your work, in your larger work in the world, as you help people kind of meet these macro systems as well. It is that same principle applies, that you get to, and in fact you have to protect your joy, your energy. Uh-huh. And discerning, like that's the discernment, right? What do I have to bring to this conversation, this moment, this opportunity? Mhm.
I tell people all the time, I'm like, the strongest boundary I currently have in my life is with the news, is with information. Ever so since for the last, I guess, oh my gosh, it's only been 100 days, but I have a strong like read only news policy. I'm not watching, I can't do video, and I want to be informed and I need to be informed. And I think I can't visually intake as much. And so I just have a read only news boundary. And that's just helping me maintain like some kind of middle place for myself.
Mhm. I like that boundary a lot, a lot. You were talking about assessing for yourself, like, what do I have to kind of meet this moment? Are there some recommendations, or what you'd want to whisper in somebody's ear if they're asking that question kind of at a bit of a larger level around, like, do I continue to try to bridge the distance in this difficult relationship versus letting this relationship go? Like, what are some of the principles that you find it helpful for people to follow? And they're asking that question about, like, what is the value here versus letting go?
Yeah, I think I wish this was a perfect, like I wish I had a flow chart that is like if you have your roommate from college and they say something and it's this problematic and they only, so I think the two biggest things in this are, no one needs to put themselves in harm, right? No one needs to put themselves in a situation that's abusive in any way. And I think the line of when do I stay at the table and when do I need to take space, I always say if you can't create space, then give space, right? So if I'm not able to create the space for us to hold together, then I need to give some space, like remove myself, or then right, if
Yes.
I'm going in every conversation I think this is only going to be successful if they move more towards X or Y, then I need to give some space, because I'm obviously not creating a space for us to both exist in that. And I think if I had a magic wand and can sort of like go and bop everyone in the world on the head, I think the number one thing I would want everyone to do more of is to trust themselves. Your friends being like, oh, you still talk to her, or like, or getting comments online, or feeling all of that is like noise, right? I think when we settle in, we know this is a person I really want to stay at the table with. And I don't think any of this work is going to happen with strangers. This is all going to be people who are already at our table, and whether or not we decide to stay.
That's what matters. Like, that is democracy in action, right? Are the conversations with the people who are already in our lives. Like, that too is a form of activism. Oh, Brit, I want to get you the Brit Barron bopping wand so that you can bop the people on the head, because what a beautiful thing. Like, it's not a violent bop. It's a very loving bop.
It's more of a tap.
It's just a little tap around. Trust yourself. Trust yourself. Come back to you, because there's so much noise. There's so much noise. And so to come back to you and to trust, that's, and I love this principle about if you cannot create space, then give space. Oh, it's so good. I just posted on the Instagram yesterday that, the healthy boundary is the amount you can give with a regulated nervous system, that you don't do.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. You're not doing favors when you are going in, like you said, with an axe to grind, with the idea that this is going to go well if I make you see something differently.
Yes.
Because people are savvy.
And I make a point, then we had a successful interaction.
Yeah, because everybody knows when you come in like that. And we've all done it. And it's just a really good
and probably will
check-in.
again.
And probably will again. Yes.
Yeah.
Brit, you're fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. Please, please, please talk about where we've got links in the show notes to where to get a copy of your wonderful book, Do You Still Talk to Grandma? When the problematic people in our lives are the ones we love. But what else do you want people to know about how to connect with you?
Yes. The book, obviously, you can find me on the Instagram at Brit Barron, on the general web at britbarron.com. And I usually just post what's going on, what's new on social media. So follow along and let's keep the conversation going.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brit, for this fascinating and hopeful conversation. I'm going to keep so many of the ideas in mind going forward, and I hope that you continue to widen your lens when you are faced with challenging conversations, and that you keep fighting for the close relationships in your life, even when things feel rocky. We need to find ways to be in relationships that are aligned with our personal and political values, and we need each other. It's a tall order, but Brit's book is going to help. So I hope that you will check it out if this conversation resonated with you. The links are in the show notes. Until next time, be well. Do you have a relationship question that you want answered on the show? Visit reimagininglove.com to send in a written or audio question. Questions can be about intimate partnerships, family relationships, friendships, you name it. If you're looking for more love and relationship content, you can find me on Instagram at dr.alexandra.solomon, or visit my website, dralexandrasolomon.com, where you'll find my blog as well as the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course based off of the popular class I teach at Northwestern University. Thank you for listening, and see you next week here on Reimagining Love.